All right, I will welcome everyone to the first Capital Improvement and Planning Committee meeting. It is Monday, January 30, 2023, and it's 7:30 p.m. All members are present and have been notified by the town clerk that everyone is fully sworn in, so thank you for doing that. I realize it was another thing to do in everyone's busy day, especially given this is just a conversion from a standing committee to from an ad hoc committee to a standing committee. Because of that, I think it's important that we organize ourselves. We need a chair, a vice chair, and a clerk for this moving forward. The roles typically for those that have been on a standing committee, you typically look at them again at the beginning of the fiscal year. So we would do this again on July 1 of 2023 as well, or the meeting closest to that. We may or may not have new members along the way, but that's typically how I've seen most standing committees work, especially given we have staggered terms now as well. So with that, I'll open the floor. We should elect a chair first.
Are you interested in being chair again, Jason?
I am happy to continue as long as no one else wants this role.
I'd like to make a motion to nominate Jason Malinowski as chair of the Capital Improvement and Planning Committee.
I'll
Sure.
second.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? All right, we need a roll call vote on that. So I'll start with Hark.
Aye.
Palmer.
Aye.
Schoner.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. And
Malinowski is going to abstain. So 401 vote. Thank you for your confidence in having me continue. Is there anyone that's interested in being the vice chair? As a reminder, Lisa was our prior vice chair and obviously is no longer with us. So we definitely will have someone new to this role. So is there anyone willing to step up for that?
I'll step up for it, but I'm not sure I'm the best person for the job. I think Andrew would make better. Jeff would make a better one.
I was going to say,
I always say that. Ever since Andrew left, I just say his name. I can't help myself. I don't.
Well, I appreciate.
I'm sorry, Jeff, but I think you make a better vice than I would. Honestly,
I think you would be terrific.
I don't know. I might say Andrew again, and then we're all.
Is there anyone that's interested in doing it for our 5-month period, and then you can both reassess? We can always add this to the agenda at any point in time.
No, I'll try it out and see how we go. If we all feel we need a change, I won't be insulted.
Everyone good with that? All right, then I'll move that Joe Palmer serve as the vice chair of the CIPC. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion? All right, roll call vote. Hark.
Aye.
Palmer.
Abstain.
Schoner.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye.
And Malinowski is aye. Now I know there's going to be a huge debate over this next one. We officially need to have a clerk. I appreciate all of you rotating the minutes over the years, and I know that hopefully that will continue. So this person really is just responsible for ensuring that the minutes get in. I have some background noise, and for once, it's not my kids. I guess, is there anyone willing to serve as our clerk just to make sure the minutes get to the town clerk appropriately? And there's help along the way, as Jeff can assure us.
Jason, when are we likely to pick up another member? Has the select board given us any idea of candidates or people that they're going to bring?
They're not exactly all coming forward at this point. I did have a conversation with the chair of the select board, Kathy Cook, today about that exact topic and making sure that through her channels, obviously all of the select board members, but also I think as any of us, as we all know, we've been fortunate to get Karen and Tony to join us along the way here too. That came really through discussion in the community. So I think they have some people in mind that they're hoping will sign up. I think hopefully our meeting schedule is attractive, that we commit to 1 to 2 meetings a month and try to stick to a tight schedule. So I'm trying to use that as a hook, but long-winded answer, Joe, of saying there's no one right now that's in front of them for appointment.
All right, so we need to recruit.
Yeah.
And do we have a budget as a standing committee now for minutes?
Not this year. However, I think we're in a better position to have that discussion as a standing committee, but we don't have one yet. Jeff, would you be offended if I just
I'm happy to do it, but I don't want to get anyone else's way if they want the role.
Tony or Karen? Any objections to that? All right, so I'm going to nominate Jeff Hark as our clerk. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
Thank you, Jeff.
Quite welcome. Well, it hasn't been voted on yet, but
We should just write team. That's where we should appoint, but we'll leave it at that. So motion is made, seconded. I don't see any further discussions. We should do a roll call. Hark,
I'll abstain.
Palmer,
Aye.
Shoner,
Aye.
Wheeler,
Aye.
and Malinowski's aye. Thank you again, Jeff. All right, on to meeting minutes. We need to approve the prior committee's final minutes so that we can move forward. The good news is, and Mark can confirm this for me, because the select board has disbanded us, this should fully finalize that committee's work and just roll right into this one. So we have 2 sets of minutes in front of us. The first is from the 19th, which was a quick short meeting prior to our select board meeting that was circulated by Tony earlier today. We'll help you with this, Tony, if we can get the Word version. We just need to add the list of documents at the end. That was my comment. I don't know if anyone has any other items.
Actually, no, Tony did he was taking minutes in the beginning, so that would cover off who did them. I was going to say that, but then I just scrolled to the top as I was saying that.
So are there any comments on those? All right, I'm going to try to do this in one motion. So are there any comments on the 20th meeting minutes, which I believe, Jeff, are from the select board advisory minutes? So
And here, the finalized version
okay,
that were approved last week, I believe, or 2 weeks ago.
so these would be consistent with those 2 other boards that were in meeting with us. Okay, are there any comments on those?
Jason, the only comment I have is that I was at the 19th meeting, but not the 20th, if you're going to do them together.
Okay, you can vote, but if you want me to separate them, I'm happy to separate them for purposes of motion.
No, so what? No, do what's quickest and easiest.
All right, then I'm going to move that we approve the draft minutes that were presented to us for December 19th with the addition of the list of referenced documents, as well as the December 20th, 22 minutes to conform with the advisory and select board minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All right, roll call vote. Hark,
Aye.
Palmer,
Aye.
Shoner,
Aye.
Wheeler,
Abstain.
Malinowski is aye, so it's a 401. Okay, chair and member updates. First is the Neary Building Committee. While the committee has not fully met, we did have a meeting with the state here and recently, and they are expecting that this project will be in front of the MSBA board, likely at their April meeting. The district has fully completed all asks. There's some finalization around enrollment going on, which will be used to help with sizing of potential facilities. So the importance of what that next step is that would be where we move into feasibility, which means we'd actually start using the money that was appropriated last year with consultants. So the first thing that we would do is you'd hire an owner's project manager and you'd hire a designer as well in collaboration with MSBA. And that would really define what we actually are talking about in terms of a project, what grades, is it a renovation? Is it something new? Is it something in between? That's where the Woodward discussion will also come back full circle. That came up multiple times in the meeting. Mark was actually in attendance as well. So that has been remarkably quiet, as you know, for the last 9 months, which was expected. But kudos to Greg Martineau and his team for all the work that they did behind the scenes as well, just to keep that process moving and keep us in the running, and look forward to having that discussion come April. You will see a posted meeting for that committee at some point when we can talk about enrollment data. Any questions on where that's at? All right, Joe, SHOPC subcommittee.
The committee is aware of the urgency of trying to get a report to the select board. The head of the committee is compiling all the information from members and putting together a finalized formatted draft that we will go through in short order and hopefully get out sometime in the next couple meetings.
Any questions for Joe? All right, Community Center Exploration Committee update. It has now been formed, fully populated, and Mark will tell me when the first meeting is, which I don't know when it is. Soon, right?
Yes, I will not tell you tonight, but it is going to be soon. Yeah, I'm trying to get that posted. So
Okay.
I'd like to say before the end of the week, but it may be into next week.
So I think the importance for that, for capital is, it came up again in the discussions with MSBA. So we're going to need to understand where that's going, because they want to see the overall community picture as well, especially when you're talking about a school. And, you know, if there were to be any school closures, how buildings would be used and what the level of community support is, because they want to support the one that has the most community support. They don't necessarily have their own view of which way something should go. They were very clear about that as well. So it's coming. The last is just an FYI from me. So right in and around the time that we met on December 19th, Karen Galligan, I guess it was through you, Brian, technically, submitted something related to an aerator for the DPW department to be added into this year's capital. It candidly wasn't ready for prime time at that point. In terms of us being able to take a position, Brian kept it kind of on the radar to make sure we didn't lose track of it, given that other things were moving forward, especially with our presentation to the select board. And since that time, it has been retracted. So obviously no action is required of us. And the main reason it was retracted is some of the potential funding sources didn't come to bear. And they're looking at potential rental or outsource type opportunities that may actually pull it completely out of capital's purview, because you're not going to be acquiring an asset in that particular instance or meet the capital threshold. Just to understand the magnitude of it, it was well north of $30,000 what they were looking at, but it does touch obviously a lot of aspects of, basically, if you think about any grounds that the town maintains, this device equipment is used on, you know, a somewhat regular basis, on an at least annual basis, if not semi-annually. So no action tonight. I just thought it was important to understand that something was brought forward. Obviously that department head is no longer with the town, but Brian and Mark and the team have really worked behind the scenes to figure out what the path forward is. So we're not hampering department operations moving forward, but kind of taking a step from bringing forward something capital related. Are there any questions on that? Okay. The next is item 5, assign a CIPC member to the new pilot committee. So any of you that were at the annual town meeting know that there was a citizen's petition to add a pilot committee to the town's bylaws. That actually passed at town meeting, but also the Attorney General ratified it. So that is now part of the town bylaw. One of the items in there is it actually had a membership seat for the old capital planning committee. I assume they will just use the CIPC now if we are to put forward someone. The charge was in your packet, as well as the email that came from Katie Berry in the select board's office. And we have the option to appoint our own member. if we so choose. So I don't know if anyone has a interest in doing this and wants to step forward.
What, do we have any idea what the commitment's going to be?
I don't think anyone knows what it's going to be because it came out of a citizen's petition as opposed to normally, right? When you set up committees, right? It's the select board or some other appointing authority setting up their committees. So it's probably going to be what that committee makes of it. Well, there was some, I'll call it guardrails put in place, I think, Mark, by the Attorney General of what that committee could and couldn't do in terms of what they can do versus the statutory authority of the select board. So I don't know, Joe.
Yeah, no, I didn't think you had a real good idea. I just
Yeah.
thought I'd ask, see if anybody had any idea. I'm gonna roll off 21 Highland pretty quick, so I should free up some time. I'd be willing to pick it up, and if we bring somebody in at a later time and they really want to take it from me, they can. I probably won't fight them too hard. So we could use it as a lure, because there are some people out there that do have a craw for this issue. I know, because I was one of them before. So I'll take. I'd love to have it.
Is there anyone else that would like to do it? All right, then I'll move that we assign Joe Palmer as our CIPC representative to the pilot committee. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
Thank you, Joe.
Yes, thank you. All right, roll call vote. Hark,
Aye.
Palmer,
Abstain.
Shoner,
Aye.
Wheeler,
Aye.
and Malinowski's aye. So that's a 401 vote. The next is a request from the EDC regarding support for a full-time employee. There was an email from Mr. Belniak in the packet. I will just say before we start any conversation, I personally, as a member of the personnel board, have already weighed in on this from a personnel perspective. So I am going to hold any and all comments until the end and only respond as a CIPC member. But I will chart our path forward a little bit in that we can choose to do nothing. We can choose to send a letter of support, or we can choose to send a letter of no support, depending on where the committee falls out from this discussion. I welcome any other potential paths, but I did think it at least was respectful to discuss it, given their request, and see where this committee wants to go. So I will be quiet and see if anyone had any thoughts of how we proceed as a committee responsive to the request.
Jason, was this sent to advisory as well? Do you know?
It's tough to tell. This was very obviously driven towards capital. I do know they obviously had to go in front of advisory for the budget meeting that occurred last Saturday. So Mark or Brian can correct me, but I'm sure advisory is having more than their fair share of discussion on this topic.
Has anyone said how expensive this person is?
They don't know because the job description has not been approved. And until you have a job description that's approved, you can't classify the person. So I think the only way you could do costing on it would be to use the existing classification of the EDC coordinator, which was a prior part-time role.
So,
But you are adding a set of benefits at the bare minimum plus an additional 20 and a half hours, if I've got my math right.
yeah, Jason, I think it's a great idea. I really do. I'm sorry, Karen. I didn't raise my hand there.
No, go ahead.
I think it's a great idea. I think the benefits theoretically outweigh the potential cost, but it just doesn't seem like it's in our purview. It's not a capital item. It's a budgetary operating item, in my opinion. So, I mean, we can lend our support to it, but that's not how much teeth that has from our perspective.
Okay, Karen.
Yeah, I don't know, I had some question about it. And I don't know if anybody here knows the answer. So it seemed like they were articulating that the reason they wanted to hire a full-time person was because the part-time position doesn't attract the right kind of talent. And so I was wondering, what that talent was and why part-time, you couldn't get it part-time versus full-time. And then it also looked like the position was going to be picking up other grant work. And I was wondering if that grant work is taking place somewhere else in the town.
Those sound like great questions for Mr. Purple, if he's willing to answer them.
So I'll take a stab at it. I'll answer the second one first. So I think right now, the grants are being handled by the departments as they become available. A lot of grants are annual, so you know them, you anticipate them, you expect them. You're very familiar with the forms and what you have to fill out, what you have to provide, and so usually then it's just a matter of available funding as to whether you get funded. There are a lot of grants that that aren't annual that you don't find out until sometimes it's too late. Sometimes you can't pull things together. The Baker administration was famous for, we have $20 million. Here's the guidelines, submit applications, go. And you got to spend it in 4 weeks. It was really one of those type of things, and I'm hoping that things change a little under this administration. So that's kind of how things go now. I think we do a pretty good job with the stuff that is annual and that is reoccurring, and we do a fair job. I think that's we do have, I think, some issues, trying to keep up with the other stuff. So we've had very difficult time over the past several years finding people to fill a part-time position, 19.5 hours, no benefits. We actually, I think one of the best people that we had, other than the person who just left, Marika, was a contract employee that we did through CMRPC, and the rate was a lot higher than what we would pay, but as a contracted service, we had the person for 12 to 13 hours a week, and we got great value. Unfortunately, they then left CMRPC and went on to a full-time position elsewhere. It's been difficult to find, and especially in this labor market, finding a part-time person is very difficult, no benefits. But I think the biggest problem that the boards are looking at right now with this position, besides the fact of how it is constructed, is that it's probably about $70,000. Brian and I thought about $70,000 to increase the position from 19.5 hours to 40 hours, and includes about $30,000 in benefits. So it is a pretty big investment. I think there is the return on your investment is probably mixed. This isn't one of those "what have you done for me lately" positions. It's difficult. You take a lot of swings, and you get a lot of misses, but you do connect, and but they don't always happen as frequently as you'd like them to, especially in this market. With the employment field just changing, and companies not renting the space, and companies looking more at remote options, and Department of Revenue has basically reduced their office down to shared desk space that you can sign up for. So I think it's a difficult field to hire into to begin with, and when you've only got a part-time position that you're not offering benefits, it makes it that much harder to find the right fit.
Yeah, so thanks, Mark. And just a follow-up question. So I guess, what are your thoughts about the revenue that this position would generate? Would it cover the cost of the person?
Well, I think it depends. So, if you take a look at, again, we're looking at grants, I think, that go beyond just simply the annual ones that we know about, that fire
Mhm.
applies for every year and council on aging applies for every year. It's those type of things. So I think the value is going to be in those grants outside of those processes. I think there's great potential for it too. I think with some of the money, I keep hearing that the state is just flush with money right now. They've just got to find vehicles to get it to the municipalities, and in some way, shape, or form. So I think there is value in the position, but I can't put a dollar figure on it. I can't say the position would be self-sufficient, and I can't say that it would happen right away. But I think there is great potential for it to be.
Thank you.
That answer your questions, Karen, or you have anything else?
That answers my questions. Thanks.
Okay, Joe?
I like the points that Jeff and Karen brought up. I'm not sure this really is in our purview, and building on what Karen was asking, I mean, we have heard discussions here and there about having a grant writer in town. And the question is, I'm not sure. I have to have a lot more information to know if I'd like this position. But if we were wrapping this position into somebody that would write grants for different departments as well, I'd be a lot more comfortable with the idea of adding somebody, especially at this cost, because as we all know, there's just a lot more grant writing going on. And as you're saying, maybe even more coming down the pike. And certainly, if I defer to you to tell me whether we have in-house personnel to write those grants, not that we can necessarily acquire the expertise by hiring a person in this position, but would it be beneficial to the rest of the town to have a person doing that?
So, I will say that there has been a discussion at the select board level, not so much at the budget summit on Saturday, a little bit, but there were conversations about whether or not, we talk about economic development. It's important for our downtown. It's important for Route 9. It's important to help fill some of these vacancies that we're seeing in the office buildings on Route 9. And the question is, can we do it on a part-time basis? The EDC chair talked about how we had a part-time person who was giving us like full-time hours. And it was like, well, wait a minute. So if we need actually this part-time position should really be a full-time position, then why are we trying to put grants into it? Why don't we just look at a more robust, EDC position and then look at the grant piece, separately? I think that, it's an interesting discussion. I'm not sure that we get to where we need to be, that everyone is comfortable for town meeting. I mean, we've got to close up this warrant in another month. And I'm not sure that we're going to get everyone on the same page. That doesn't mean that, we couldn't get everybody on the same page for a fall meeting. But we'll see.
Back to something you just said though. So what you're saying is this would really be a full-time position on its own without grant writing in it. Is that what you were inferring?
It could. That's part of the discussion that the select board has been having. The discussion came up at the meeting as to, we talk about EDC and making it more robust, and you look at our neighbors in Marlborough and Westboro, and what they've got very robust, commissions and self-supporting, self-standing, really robust organizations. We have a part-time position, so it's really not fair to be comparable, to them. So there is the thought that possibly, this could be a full-time position all on its own. So in other words, don't try to mix grant writing with EDC simply to get the full-time position, because maybe it could be self-sustaining as a full-time position on its own.
Okay. Because I wouldn't compare us to many of the towns around us. We're too small, don't have the commercial area to develop. I mean, Westboro's. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Tony, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I guess just listening to this discussion for 5 or 10 minutes here, I guess I will second or third the opinion. It doesn't seem like it's this committee's responsibility. And if it was, then I'd have like 3 hours of questions. So this does not seem sufficiently baked for this committee to have an opinion.
So I'll just close it up with one final thought, that in order for this position to become to go from Pinocchio to being a real boy, it needs to be, the job description needs to be approved by Personnel Board. Personnel Board needs to place it on the classification grid. And then town meeting needs to approve that as part of the bylaw. Personnel Board's got one more meeting scheduled before the warrant gets finalized. And we still have this job description is in flux right now with advisory. Select Board has approved it, but with advisory and Personnel Board. So if we can't all get on the same page, which at this point I'm not quite sure is likely in the next couple of weeks, I don't think that this could, this can happen for the March town meeting. That's why I'm kind of already starting to say, well, it may be something you could get everyone on the same page for the fall. I just don't see it for March.
So I was of the view that everyone else has already expressed, but I thought it was important as the person that made the agenda to bring it forward for at least discussion in case I was out to lunch. So while we are somewhat of a budgetary committee, personnel and the overall budget is not, that's not our job. So I will just send a quick summary to the EDC saying that we're not really weighing in at this point. If they would like to have a conversation with any one of us individually to try to seek support, if it did get on a warrant, then so be it. They can do that, as we're all individual taxpayers in this community. And then if it does go forward, we can certainly have a discussion on at least the grant piece, if that stays in, and if there's anything we want to weigh in specific to that. But let's wait for more information, it seems like. So unless anyone has anything else they want to add to that, we'll move on from that topic. Okay. Item 7, I'm going to take together, but we probably need to do 2 separate motions for the benefit of Tony. As you all remember, we spent most of our summer dealing with roads. But one of the things that we advocated for was find other projects in town that required paving that we could bundle into the contract to hopefully get efficiencies on those projects, but also bring up the efficiencies on the roads, because we all know we wanted to do more than we could based on what balance was there. Those 2 items that we had specifically targeted as what they call add alts in the bid package related to the Trotter School parking lot and the golf course parking lot. We're going to talk about Trotter School parking lot first. So this was included through collaboration with Greg Martineau and Keith Lavoie from the school administration. This had been a long-standing item on their capital plan. It is not town meeting funded. It comes from reserve fund that they get from facility use fees. But similar to what we did last year related to the Finn parking lot, we did take, obviously, the superintendent has submitted a memo at this point, and we did take a formal vote on it to use the revolving fund account to fund a project like this. Again, the bid is in and has been awarded by the select board. So the numbers are firm at this point on both projects we're going to discuss, but I thought it was important to bring it back to this committee, and thanks to Greg for submitting information for the meeting. So are there any questions on the Trotter School parking lot? All right, then I'm going to move that we support the superintendent's request related to the Trotter School parking lot in conjunction with the overall town road bid package as outlined in the memo. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Okay, roll call vote. Hark,
Aye.
Palmer,
Aye.
Joner,
Aye.
Wheeler. Aye.
Aye.
And Malinowski's aye. So that passes 5-0. The next relates to the golf course parking lot. This was originally submitted by Mark when the golf course committee was call it a little bit of a hiatus between their change in membership. And it was submitted at $150,000. As you saw in the packet, it now, and apologies, this came in pretty late today, so I'll just make sure everyone's aware of the final cost. The final cost was 63,520. So not quite 100,000 less, but certainly a significant amount less than what had been budgeted. This would be funded through the golf revolving account, which is with fees generated from the management company through overall operations on the course. So are there any items that you would like to discuss on this particular item? All right, then I will move that capital CIPC support the use of the golf course revolving funds related to the paving of the golf course parking lot. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All right, roll call vote. Hark,
Aye.
Palmer,
Aye.
Shoner.
Guess I should abstain.
Okay, you're abstaining.
Yep.
Wheeler
Aye.
and Malinowski is aye. So it's 401. Good luck with that project. Long time coming from walking that dirt road. So
Yeah, it's really, and I appreciate the committee's support for that. Obviously, Tony Shoner is the chair of the golf committee and has really started to invigorate that committee again. This has been the big issue for them. They've asked for this for a long time. When you start kicking up dust and dirt on that road, where does it go? It goes all over the police cruisers, which are parked all right next to the road. We've been trying to figure out a way to do this. Jason pointed out to me earlier that the original estimate was $150,000. But back when we started asking question several years ago, before Conservation Commission gave us the authority to pave it, that price was about where we were now, with the $65,000 range. So I'm really glad that we got back there with this bid. I tried to convince Brian Valentine to bond it. He refused. And so, I don't blame him. So we'll have the available revenue in the golf revolving fund to do this after we finish the T reconstruction work, which is been put out as a rebid. Actually, we just got the bids back in, so we need to review them and then get them to select board to look at. And then hopefully, we're probably not going to have a whole lot of golf revenue left for the remainder of calendar 23 and maybe calendar 24 before we can look at doing, another project of any significance. So again, appreciate the committee's support for this.
all right. All right. We are going to move on to 2023 town meeting preparation. So at our last meeting in December, jointly with Select Board and Advisory, we heard the Algonquin Regional High School athletic complex presentation. We didn't take any positions that night. So obviously a lot of discussion amongst many committees. I wanted to see if the committee was ready to vote where they stand on that for purposes of informing town meeting. Is there anyone not ready to vote? Okay. I will mention the funding for the project, which was most of the discussion, I thought. I didn't think there was a lot of discussion on need, or there was a little bit on the turf at the end, but the funding is still very much a question of what will come from Southborough CPA, what will come through general fund. But anything I have heard, this is not going to impact taxes until the FY 2027. I think that's the only static thing we keep hearing, other than maybe some residual interest. So regardless of whether the project moves forward or not in this year, the cost will really not be borne for a few years once the other debt is retired. But more to come on that. the superintendent, I think, is trying to make it simple as possible, because he has to deal with two town meetings. And then there are definitely other ideas out there in terms of what's best for Northborough versus what's best for Southborough. I can assure you that Mark and Brian are very much part of those conversations. I've been looped in to a few as well, just to make sure we have a right plan, but there is not the exact plan yet, other than this does not have an impact on your taxes next year. This is more of a longer term project. So see if that generates any additional questions. Otherwise, I'm going to make a motion and see where we land. Any questions? All right, then I'm going to move that the CIPC support the Algonquin Regional High School Athletic Complex being presented at the 2023 annual town meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion? All right, roll call vote. Park,
Aye.
Palmer,
Aye.
Shoner,
Aye.
Wheeler,
Aye.
and Malinowski is aye. So that is unanimous. I will keep everyone posted. I'm sure that will be the last thing Mark finalizes in the warrant, if I had to make a prediction based on where that's at. Okay. Trotter School HVAC unit. So if you recall, we did talk to the select board about, I don't know if I'll call it the forgotten HVAC funds from the state, but certainly something that I don't think was front of mind for a lot of people. For the $100,000, the select board has discussed it at this point, and is my understanding, and has no other HVAC project for non-school town-owned buildings. So they have offered the $100,000 to the next capital item related to HVAC in a town-owned building, which would be at the Trotter School. Greg Martineau and Keith Lavoie have gotten a latest price estimate, and it's holding. So that's also good news at $250,000. That was also in the superintendent's memo to the committee about what he's looking for. So he is looking for support for $150,000 to fund the residual part of that project to get it done this year. Again, we are accelerating a project. I will tell you, I did ask for written confirmation from him, Keith, and the facility supervisor over there, Brian Fantoni, that when they go to replace the roof in a year or two, that this HVAC unit isn't going to have to come up and like basically start from scratch. And we have gotten that in writing as well. They're completely independent based on the area where this unit's going. I think Greg's memo was self-explanatory in terms of the issues they're currently facing. So I would have argued it probably should have been on this year's capital plan to begin with, but I know they always try to be cognizant of other things. So we'll talk a little bit about funding source in a second when we get to the next items, but I will give you kind of a preview. Is this would normally be a general fund item, but the select board will have it in their purview to use the tax relief bucket that the ARPA committee allocated, and Brian can walk through what he was thinking there. But this may or may not hit your taxes, but what we need to do is vote on it as is it ready? Is this the right time? And is this the right project? Given the other facts that we have, and that we already have $100,000 in the bank for it. So open it up for questions, comments on that particular piece.
So the idea is that they're going to take ARPA funds from that the ARPA committee assigned and refunnel it back into this. Is that
A series of one-time capital projects. So at their last meeting, they took a vote to take $500K of tax relief that you had all allocated, at least you and Tony as part of a broader group, had recommended for one-time projects to lower the tax rate this year. So this is one item that has been flagged as a potential one-time project so it doesn't hit the tax rate and in the spirit of tax relief. But otherwise it would be general fund if that didn't move forward.
excellent?
Okay. Do you have a question, Jeff?
Yeah, just quickly, is there any expiration on that $100,000 from the state? Does it just need to be basically, benchmarked for this project, or does it have to be done by a certain point? Do we have any risk of losing that? I guess is what I'm trying to say.
If we approve it this year, there's no risk of losing it because then you would have appropriated it and they'd be able to go out to bid.
Okay.
I think the concern, I don't have the exact dates in front of me, although we should all have them probably memorized at this point, is you do have to use the funding by a certain point a couple of years down the road. And knowing how fiscal years run, right, and how town meeting process runs, there was a general concern that if you wait another year, A, is the price going to change? Who knows, right? Or stabilize. And B, are you going to run close to when you actually have to use the money by? You muted yourself when you just.
No, thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay. All right. So then I will move that the CIPC support accelerating the charter school HVAC unit for a total cost of $250,000, with $100,000 coming from state ARPA funding forward to the FY24 capital plan. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Roll call vote. Hark,
Aye.
Palmer,
Aye.
Shoner,
Aye.
Wheeler,
Aye.
and Malinowski's aye. So that's unanimous. Okay. Does everyone have the Excel spreadsheet open for capital articles, or do you need me to pop it open on the screen as well? All right, just let me know if I lose anyone at any point. What I thought I would do first is have Mark or Brian just at high level. We're going to go line by line just to give an update on a few items, but just walk through the exercise that you went through at the direction of the select board so that the committee understands what parameters you're working with from an overall budget perspective, why you did this, why you have different buckets, and then we can obviously update a few items as we go here. But I think the background is really important to understand what we're talking about, given that technically capital already made its recommendations, but really this is what's going to end up coming to town meeting.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to defer to Brian on this one. He saw that one coming a mile away.
That's nice. So the board gave us direction to try to get to a 6% and a 5% tax rate as a goal for FY24. So we quickly realized that a big piece of this is the capital and how we handled that. There was no way we could get to in fact, we did not get to the 5% because one of the caveats of the exercise was not to reduce services in town. And there was really no way to get below about 5.6% or 5.7% without starting to cut departments and starting to reduce labor and services and all that. So the bottom line for this committee is, of course, we were allowed $500,000 in ARPA money to offset various items, one-time items, things of that nature. And, the team who was the assessor, the accountant, myself and Mark, went through and assigned funding sources for not only capital, but other items. And, the bottom line is we took a lot of the capital and actually assigned it to ARPA money, which made sense. There's a lot of one-time things that are on the capital list for our town meeting this year. So, we took that advantage of the board's direction, did that. And I'm sure you can see that by the documents you have. We did do a few other things as far as, using some donation money and other things to offset some capital too. But there's no doubt that this year is a weird year, and we ended up putting a lot of capital money through either ARPA or other sources of funding. it's just the way it is. It's the only way you can do to reach the goals that the select board gave us. So we can take a look at it, but I think it's a good plan. The only thing I'd probably point out is I don't think the selectmen had an appetite, Mark can correct me, but I know they made mention of not pushing out capital to next year to FY25. That was mentioned, and the board seemed to be in full support of, getting the capital through that we need to this year. So it's my opinion is it's unlikely they'll take up pushing off any capital. However, the one thing I do want the board to do tonight, and if Mark agrees, is to at least tell us the first, 1 or 2 items that would be on the bubble if we had to push something off till next year. We do have a meeting tomorrow night that the budget is primarily the main topic, and that question may be asked. If even if it's not asked, we should have the answer to what the capital committee supports if we had to put off an item or two, what it would be. So I think that's definitely a decision that this committee could make tonight, and we could carry forward to tomorrow night. And I wish it was reversed. I would almost wish it was the select board meeting before we did tonight, but that's just the way it is. So again, I don't think they will support that, but we should be ready for the answer. So I hope that's enough background to move forward.
Anyone have any questions in the background? Brian, the one thing, first, thank you to you and your team for, I'll call it the collaboration and kind of keeping everyone informed, right? I think it's very easy for us to work in a silo and just look at capital and not think about anything else that's going on. But in your 5.6, I think, % you said was your number. It's important to make sure everyone remembers this whole shift, right? Like, and we could have, whole discussion on that, but the budget itself is not going up 5.6%, correct? It's the expected impact on the residential taxpayer is going up 5.6%. If the budget stopped moving today, is that a fair statement?
Yes. So basically it's about a 2 to 2.5% swing. So the budget we have in front of us today, with the capital included, with ARPA using to offset this capital items, is about a 3.5% budget, which is pretty darn good actually in these times. So, that's the kind of message we're going to bring tomorrow night, is to say that this budget is, although it's, and Mark, I think will agree that it's built on a lot of one-time money, which is a problem, but it is good to get through this year. So it's a good budget. Like I said, if you take away the swing of the commercial and residential, it's probably more like a 3.5% budget, which with the inflationary pressures is very reasonable, I think. So again, I think the board tomorrow night will support all the capital, but we just need a little more information to what your committee thinks to bring forward tomorrow night.
Okay. All right. So here's what I would like to do is just go down the list. We're not gonna have to go down this whole list because some don't relate to capital, but Brian's given me, it was easier just for him to give it to us this way. But just talk about where each of the capital items that we previously approved stand, potential updates. And if we have a consensus, I don't plan to re-vote every single thing. I'll probably do kind of an omnibus sort of motion at the end that we support any discussion that occurs here. So the first item on row 2 is the cabin chassis for truck 43 at the DPW. This was $200,000 that we previously approved, had it at a general fund. Brian is recommending to the select board that they fund that out of ARPA as part of tax relief. Brian, I personally had no objection to that. I just think the select board needs to be aware that there's a truck like that every year, right? So so we will have a little bit of a, I'll call it jump, all things static for that particular department next year, if that's the way they go. But I don't know that it's our job to pick and choose what goes into ARPA and what doesn't, unless anyone disagrees with that. What I'm going to do, instead of asking every time if anyone has any questions, just interrupt me or raise your hand. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep going. I'm going to assume everyone's in favor of where we're trending unless you speak up. Road maintenance, this is unchanged. We recommended 400,000. I'm not aware of the pavement management program being completed, but obviously we have to do something. And there's a lot of historic data that supports that number is a good number to, continue to check off streets. So any other comments on that? Next one should generate some discussion. This is the only thing you removed, Brian, right? From what I can tell, right? And it's somewhat inconsistent with what you said, the select board don't want to defer capital, but this is obviously a new capital item. We've been trying to put this forward for many years of maintaining sidewalks, not new sidewalks. So there is a significant amount of ARPA funding that was allocated towards sidewalks, and that needs to start to probably move forward if we get a DPW superintendent. But I think capital needs to weigh in on whether removing the full 200 is the right answer. You're talking, Brian. Sorry, I can't hear you.
Sorry, I thought I hit it. Mark may be able to correct me on this. There is a set amount of money in the ARPA set asides for sidewalk maintenance. That's why we removed that. I can't remember the amount. I thought it was a pretty good amount too.
I think it's about 700,000.
It is.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Tony or Joe need to keep me honest on this. My understanding was that was geared towards expansion of the sidewalk network, not maintenance of the existing infrastructure.
That's correct.
So obviously the select board can do what they please with that, but I just want it to be genuine to what I understood the recommendation to be. So, but I understand why you would argue that, Brian, for sure. So does anyone have any strong thoughts on this?
Yeah, Brian, if you were to put that back in, what would that do on the rate differential?
So that would be about 0.5% on the tax rate. So you'd be back at about you'd be back at about the 6% level.
But
they asked us.
what about your net number that you mentioned? You mentioned 3%. Is it like 3.5 now?
Oh, so yeah, it would be about 3.5. Yes. Yes.
I just feel like that one's gonna get a lot of pushback given all the, all the feedback and dialogue at, previous town meetings. So I don't know. Just thinking about how much that's actually going to be incremental to everyone's pocketbook. Doesn't seem like it's going to be that significant to keep it in.
And the board can this board can always, opine that you do recommend that be left in. I mean, these things were sort of, to try to meet a goal in a very difficult time, but I understand what you're saying, Jeff, so.
No, I totally respect what you did, Brian. I try to understand how much of an actual impact it would have for.
I mean, Jeff, one of the things we tried to do too, when we were looking at this, is trying to take out anything new. And quite honestly, we've never funded the sidewalk maintenance either. So, not to be cheeky about it, but we did still consider it new. It's the second year we've tried to fund it. And so, until we actually do fund it, it's still a new piece. So that was something that we took out. The select board had kind of, looked at that and kind of headed in that direction, just didn't take that final vote. And I think was waiting to see the discretion that the finance team was going to bring forward.
Got it.
So I think we have three options on this. We can accept Brian's full removal recommendation, which Brian, if I were in your position, would totally have gone that way. But obviously we also listen to the resident, have listened to the resident feedback. We could take the 200 and recommend a different number, right? So really Jeff just asked, what the maximum impact is, but, to start something, right? And the select board could decide whether they, I mean, it's technically part of a separate article anyway, so people can use their discretion on that, or ask them to specifically allocate through ARPA an ability to start a maintenance plan on some of the existing sidewalks with a commitment to continue this moving forward. Or you could knock down the road maintenance to 350 and specifically allocate 50 to sidewalks. But I think we all know what state our roads are in too. So that would be solving one problem and creating another. So those are, I think, the options we have on the table. I don't know if anyone has a strong view of which direction to go.
I just have a quick question, Jason. The 700,000 in ARPA funds that is for new sidewalks. Is there any opportunity to take some of that and put it to sidewalk maintenance instead?
They could do it all to sidewalk maintenance. I guess Tony and Joe should speak to as the individuals that were part of that recommendation, if there's any distinction or strong feelings from the committee in terms of why it was worded that way.
It was felt that this was a generational opportunity to expand the network, and we had the master plan already had a list of projects ranked. The top, I believe, 8 projects were ranked in terms of the sidewalks in town. If we don't start doing them, we probably never will. That's just about where we are. And don't get me wrong. I mean, just to put a context on it, I mean, when they're talking about doing the water table and ripping up Parkerville, if the town decides not to put a sidewalk on Parkerville when they do the Hopkinton Water Project, if they decide to do it, my street outside is not likely to see one for another 15 to 20 years. Because when they redo it, if they don't put a sidewalk in, they're not going to go back and do a sidewalk on that street. So, anytime we do a road or a project like we're doing 85, if we don't redo that sidewalk or put it in at that time, we're not going to get one. So, I think everybody on the committee was on board with saying what we really were looking for was at least 1 or 2 good expansions of the sidewalks in town to make it a more pedestrian and friendly town to bikers and walkers.
And the only thing I'll add is I think the sentiment of the ARPA committee was that it was for like one-time expenses. And it seems like if we want to maintain our sidewalks, they should be maintained, outside of the ARPA funds.
Right, I do recall that about this being for new projects. Thank you.
All right, where is everyone landed on this one?
I would love some of it to be put back in. It doesn't have to be a full 200, but I would even be supporting at least 100 getting back in. Just because we have to start somewhere and getting this moving, and we can allocate more money next year or push for more money next year, but at least get something on the page under sidewalk maintenance.
I was willing to go as low as 50, to be completely honest, but I do agree that we need to do something because otherwise we are being tone deaf to basically, I think what we dealt with it the most this summer, right? You both dealt with it on ARPA, right? And I get you on the expansion. So unless they can find something in ARPA, like in undistributed amounts, so to say, then I think we need to recommend something. So I'm fine with 100. I'm fine with 50. I'm okay also going down from 200. That's where at least where I'm at. I don't know. So Joe, I heard 100. Jeff, where are you at?
I think 100 is fair to start.
Tony?
I think we should maintain our sidewalks. Let's do 100. Like we recommend 100. The select board can make whatever choice they want.
Yep. Karen?
Sounds good to me.
Okay. So we'll encapsulate that in a motion at the end, because I'm hearing wide consensus on that. Brian, you, Mark, and I can coordinate on how we make sure. I did talk to Kathy this afternoon too and warned her that there's probably going to be something that needs to be updated for purpose of the packet, and I told her we'd coordinate. So I think that's probably your first update. Are Okay, operations supervisor vehicle, as you recall, this is a total of 105,000, 75,000 of it, allocated out of, originally the general fund. Brian has now swapped it to the ARPA category, and then, the residual of it would be out of the water fund, based on how the truck is used. As you know, this one came in very late, was not part of our planning cycle. We all know the turnover at the DPW. But it did come in, we acknowledged it, we discussed it, we put a placeholder. We certainly raised a concern about take-home vehicle policy. Mark has worked with the select board, and actually this position actually in the collective bargaining agreement, as I understand it, actually is authorized to take home vehicles. So people, I think, misunderstood. We obviously weren't going after the policy part of it, although people naturally usually like to talk about those things. We were talking about what type of vehicle should you be taking home to be able to get back and forth. So I had a little conversation with Chris Leroy, who is the DPW operations superintendent, just to get his view on the world. He obviously is the one that stands to benefit the most, I guess, from this vehicle, but also knows what he needs to do his job effectively. And I think from everything I've heard, he does nothing but great work for the town. So I just wanted to hear it directly from the person that needs the vehicle. And I was surprised with what I learned. That vehicle doesn't need to be replaced. In fact, the vehicle that likely needs to be replaced the most is a 2004 pickup truck that is assigned to the DPW superintendent. That vehicle is getting about 8 miles per gallon currently, is what I understand. And while it hasn't even hit 100,000 miles, I think we know what, by my math, almost 20 years of sitting in a salty sort of environment and doing plow operations can do to a vehicle in the Northeast. So he believes he can get at least another 5 years out of the current operations supervisor vehicle. He believes, though, that the pickup truck that is assigned to the DPW superintendent likely should be replaced based on those facts. Almost 20 years old, end of useful life, obviously horrible mileage by anyone's standards. But the other fact that I should just raise is the quote for the operations supervisor vehicle has now come from 105 down to 87,000. So we're trending in the right direction all around. This conversation was recent, so I don't have a full quote of what the pickup truck would be. But with a plow, it was very clear it was not going to be greater than $50,000. And the important part of the plow is it does exempt certain parts of the green communities in terms of what type of vehicle you can and can't get, and this vehicle needs to be able to plow. Was very clear. So we have a few things we can do. We can accept this recommendation and replace the pickup truck, which would also likely be the vehicle that's going to and from home. So not a much smaller vehicle, not like tremendously smaller, but certainly not a diesel going back and forth to the individual's home. Or we could proceed as originally planned and realize that the cost is coming down. Or option 3 is we could just wait for a DPW superintendent, which we will not have a recommendation on before town meeting in terms of how to proceed on this, which means that the earliest that the department would be able to deal with this item would be the fall. And I think there's a general desire not to deal with budgetary items in the fall if you can. So again, I'm a little surprised, but it's all trending the right direction. So I'll take it. I don't know where others think we should go. So I'll open the floor. Go ahead, Jeff.
Finally raising my hand. I mean, I think that we need the person in charge of that department to make a decision on if the DPW superintendent needs a new car. Can I offer maybe a fourth option? Can we possibly allocate some of that money from ARPA back into the sidewalks to get it closer to the original 200 if we were to pass on this $105,000 spend? Or 75 from the general
Yeah, you
fund.
should probably look at 75 because the other 35 was coming from another funding
Yeah.
source. Certainly happy to entertain the option. What are others think of that option or any of the three that I threw out to begin with? Go ahead, Joe.
I guess I'd like to know how important this pickup truck is in terms of its usability. I mean, if they're putting this pickup with a plow on it and they're going to need it to do plowing, or other business in the DPW, I mean, if it's normally and regularly used, rather than just a drive home vehicle, that's something that I'd be very interested in knowing.
My understanding is up until January of 2022, the DPW superintendent was using it for her day-to-day responsibilities, including take-home vehicle, which was contractually part of her contract. But yeah, it's used for operations, it's used for plowing, and it's used for day-to-day driving when it doesn't have a plow on it.
And you were told that it is needed.
I don't know that I can advocate that anyone should be driving around at 8 miles per gallon these days, because there is an operational budget consideration to this too, right? It is used currently, is my understanding, even though we don't have a superintendent, because they can redeploy the assets to fill the needs of the department. I don't know, Mark, if you have any other insight that I wasn't able to glean from this discussion.
No, I think that pretty much covers it until we get a new department head.
Go ahead, Tony.
And the downside of waiting for the new department head?
Likely waiting another budget year unless the powers that be are willing to entertain a financial budget article in the fall if it's needed. So the example I was thinking through is it's very common for department supervisor of that department in particular to have a take-home vehicle. So if you hire the person, they're given it in their contract, you're now giving them a 2004 vehicle to drive to and from wherever they come. And it's obviously an asset that if, let's just say, another vehicle breaks down, that you have to plow, albeit it's not the one you would send out to plow a major thoroughfare, but it obviously, we have a lot of side streets, et cetera, in town. So I think from what I understand, the reason it came in so last minute is they looked at their capital in the out years, i.e. the next 3 to 4 years, and realized that there was really no good place to put it. And obviously you start kicking things down the road, then it's going to have a ripple effect on trucks beyond this. I just think they candidly picked the wrong truck originally to throw out there. Again, it is very hard without a department head though. Not gonna lie. Jeff?
Jason, did you say that, excuse me, a comparable car or comparable truck for the superintendent to replace would be about 50?
No more than 50, and that includes the cost to get a plow for it.
Okay. So not to make it even more complex, could we can I rescind my prior recommendation and say that maybe we replace the 25 with a $50,000 truck, then use the rest of the 25 to get the sidewalk maintenance up to 125?
So you're saying, well, I guess, Brian, this is where we need you, because the 50 likely should then be also allocated to water, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Same distribution, right?
Okay.
So it wouldn't even be 50 coming at ARPA. So that would help your math, if I'm doing my math correctly, Jeff.
Right. It just seems like there's gonna be a savings on the operational budget as well from just a fuel perspective.
Yeah, I guess no one wants to replace the operation supervisor's vehicle at this point for the 87. Is that fair? Okay. So we have a tough time replacing something that still has 5 years of life left on it, which is basically the summary of that. Where are people, forget about the math to the sidewalk for a second, Jeff. I just want to see where people are at on pickup truck or no at this point for an amount no greater than 50.
For me, I think the bigger issue is that we're on the hook for a vehicle for the new superintendent come in. And whether we allocate it 6 months from now or now, I'm not sure that makes an operational difference to them, not necessarily a huge tax implication to the citizens now. And they may come in and say they don't need it, in which case, that money will become available back to the town, or at least that allocation. So I'm in favor of putting it on the books and seeing what happens. As opposed to-
Let me throw another scenario out there, Joe, is this vehicle could also be used for purposes of the operation supervisor. And what we know, the only thing we know at this point is that role is contractually obligated to a take-home vehicle. So this vehicle could also be in that role as well and provide the reliability for coming back in a snow event or other weather event.
I mean, we're looking at an almost 20-year-old truck that we'd be sending around plowing. I mean, there are a whole lot of things in here that don't.
Yeah. Okay, so you're kind of, I don't want.
I'm on board with putting a pickup truck on the books.
Okay, all right. Tony, Karen, Jeff, are you on board with the pickup truck or no at this point?
Yeah, I think it probably would also help from a recruiting perspective. You might open up or keep some options of candidates if they know they're going to get a reliable truck versus having to drive around a 20-year truck that, could break down at any point.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, Jeff. So I support the purchase.
It's fine with me.
Okay, so Jeff, I'm not ignoring your consideration about sidewalks. Let's we'll put 50, we'll do some allocation between water in general fund. I need to keep going on the list though, because I want to make sure you don't want to creep anything else back in based on where we land here. So, okay. All right. Library installation of security cameras. Nothing has changed here. And it's coming out of the general fund. Townhouse office furniture replacement. The 25,000 has shifted from the general fund to ARPA per Brian's recommendation. Facilities maintenance fund, the annual 100K would stay general fund. The DPW annex new furnace has shifted 15,500 from general fund to ARPA. Brian, this is me speaking. I don't know what the rest of the committee says, but on this 15.5, I think it's really important that they confirm that they have no intentions of doing anything with that building in the near term, like from a disposal perspective.
Yes, agreed.
I don't care what as long as they're committed to using it for town purposes, I'm in favor of it. But if they're going to bring a warrant next year, and I get the board can change, but at least who's sitting in those seats right now, I think it's important for them to affirm that or let us know what information they need on that. Fire PPE. This is a $40,000 expense. I confirmed with Chief Achilles today that based on his replacement plan, he still needs the 40. The good news is St. Mark's has already offered 20K to fund that. So that's why you see the reduction to 20K. So the remainder now is slotted for the general fund. But I think we may have some more discussion on that once we get down to the ambulance fund. Police cruisers, this number has stayed the 148 out of general fund. Facilities elevator repairs. This has moved 23,000 from general fund to an ARPA recommendation. We talked about that, the need for that at the last meeting. The police rifles are coming out all together in terms of town meeting warrant. They're going to use existing Harvard funds that are already in the bank to purchase those. And the school HVAC, we obviously just accelerated it in the capital plan. That would not come out of the general fund, so it's not included in Brian's 5.6% and would come out of ARPA. Any questions on any of that? All right, I'm going to skip over the FY24 budget articles that has nothing to do with capital. And we'll go down to FY24 ambulance fund. The first one is the all-terrain utility vehicle for 40,000. All of these things we originally recommended out of ambulance fund and are still in the ambulance fund unless we strike them as we talk through them. There's no update on the need for this. I just will say I was informed that there's both select board and advisory members that have a variety of questions on it. I think we heard most of them actually when we had our joint meeting with them. So I expect there to be discussion on this in general tomorrow night, even though taking it out doesn't really impact the tax rate unless they allocate this 40,000 from the ambulance fund to the general fund. There anyone that's changed their view on this one? Okay. Defibrillators, paramedic. When I spoke to the chief, he does not see any way he's going to be ready to procure these anywhere in and around July 1st. So he's recommending we push this off to the earliest of fall town meeting. The reason that the ambulance fund is important in general is there are certain accounting rules that, unless anyone really wants a lesson on how these funds work, is the money actually has to be in the bank on the date of town meeting to be able to fund all of these, plus our prior debt obligations that we've committed to in prior town meetings. If we went with this current list, Brian's, estimate along with Carla is that we'd be a little short, potentially up to $40,000 short if you kind of follow the trending. Well, we'd have the money in the bank by the end of the year, just the way that municipal accounting works, especially the way this fund was set up. We just can't do it. So we are going to have to cut something from the ambulance fund. The chief has obviously offered this one, and unless anyone disagrees, he's not going to spend it even if we give it to him until he's ready. He's got one of his lieutenants looking at a program on this. So my recommendation would be to take it out unless anyone disagrees. Durable medical equipment, nothing's changed here for 20,000. Ambulance power stretcher for 55, nothing has changed. Fire truck 21, this was the chassis and body repair that has a much longer story to it in terms of the overall plan. We had made a recommendation that the chief really put together, an internal committee and or whatever he thought he needed internally within his department and come before not only capital, but select board and advisory, given the magnitude of the longer term implications of this apparatus, given it would be the most expensive vehicle by far that we own in this town. While removing it or keeping it in really doesn't change funding in FY24, because Brian had initially planned to bond this particular one. It's not ready for town meeting discussion, so the chief has recommended pulling that one out as well. Again, it has a much different impact than the defibrillators where Brian was going to appropriate, but the recommendation here is to pull it out. So unless anyone thinks it's ready and wants to push it through, that's coming out. The last two are not discussions because we've already approved those in prior years. These are just lease payments for decisions we made a couple years ago. Any questions on any of that? Okay, so I'm just looking down the list. The ops supervisor vehicle again appears underwater. So we'll talk about how we're going to finalize our recommendation on that. The fire portable radios on row 56 are moving forward as planned. It would be bonded, and there would be enough capacity to bond those through the ambulance fund. I guess, Brian, for you and Mark, this committee has not talked about Breakneck Hill or the Pocket Park. Not sure how much any of us really want to talk about it, but we should get a reading of whether those are capital projects or separate projects. I don't know enough about either one, but we don't have to talk about that tonight. You should just see whether select board wants anything. I know there's plenty of people looking over both. So at least I personally am not offended if we don't have to get involved with either, but I want to respect the policy. Okay. So, Brian, I think we've, through this conversation, we obviously have changed the sidewalk. We have a pickup truck. We'll come back to Jeff's potential recommendation in a second. We've removed 100,000 from the ambulance fund, which gives you more than enough cushion there now to not have to worry about it. Those are the main things I think we've done thus far. I'm going to throw something out, Jeff, just for consideration. Is I was thinking with the quote unquote savings that we had out of the ARPA bucket, and realizing that Brian left kind of 12, just over $11,000 in that bucket to begin with, before we started allocating. I was thinking that it would be more appropriate for the UTV, if the select board thought that that was such a priority, to fund that out of ARPA as opposed to the ambulance fund, which would pretty much eat away at your recommendation. That's at least where I came into this meeting at. I'm not necessarily opposed to your recommendation either, though. But I think the reason I was trending that way is it would give the select board some discretion to increase the offset from the ambulance fund to the general fund, which would directly impact all of our tax rates and really make them, responsible for what I would call the longest lived asset on the capital plan without being purchased. Like it clearly was a want more than a need for many years, but I think the chief has obviously made some very compelling arguments in the more recent years that were, I think, a little different than some of the initial presentations. So that's where I was kind of trending, just to give Brian a little more wiggle room in the ambulance fund. Let them make some policy decisions on how much should go from the ambulance fund to the general fund. And, even potentially ask if, to the extent that there are Harvard funds available on the fire side, given the contribution that Chief Newell made, if that's a priority capital item for them, allocate it to the UTV or something else in here, just to, in light of everything we're talking about. So I throw that on the table. I'm not wed to it, but just was another way of looking at this. And now there's silence.
So just to repeat what you said, so take the 75 out, replace it with, let's call it 35. Pickup truck ish.
We said a 30-70 split, right, Brian, between water and.
Yeah, so that's 35,000 ish, something like that. So that gives you a $40,000 net. So you'd plug in the ATV into that.
Yeah, so if I do that, you'd have a pickup truck for 35,000 coming out of ARPA, and then you would have that brings you to 448,500 for total number. If I did my math right, so that would give you, candidly, 51 $1,500 to allocate towards the UTV. You don't have to obviously allocate the full amount. But you'd allocate, if you allocated the 40, then you'd give Brian more room in the ambulance fund. You'd accomplish the UTV item sooner before the prices go up again. And the only thing it would jeopardize was your proposal to add 100,000 to the add beyond the 100,000 on sidewalks.
Yeah. Jason, you did allude to the PPE a couple minutes ago. Something about that in the ambulance fund.
Mm-hmm.
We'll have to push that back in and then free up.
So Brian, if we did this, is there any reason the PPE wouldn't move to the ambulance fund?
No,
So that would free up 20,000, Jeff, out of general fund to assist with sidewalks or other things.
So then that change, which would be about an 80,000 increase in capital.
Correct. Of which I think we would have just given them the ability to pull all of that from the ambulance fund if they really wanted to. Not our policy decision, though, I don't think. But I think we're giving them more tools in their toolbox. They can choose whether they want to go to town meeting. But I think this committee's been loud and clear that 0 for sidewalk maintenance is just not where we want to trend based on the feedback that we're getting specific to capital.
And as per Brian's numbers before, so we'd be under a 0.25% increase over what has already been allotted, just under a quarter.
The other thing I probably should have led with is, and Joe, this will be of interest to you in your brand new role tonight. Kathy Cook, select board chair, but also is their, I'll call it pilot liaison to the schools because that committee wasn't formed. She has not completed her discussions with them. So to the extent that those discussions yield a penny more for the town from any institution, that will again give them flexibility to work with, which is why I think it's very important that we took the position we did in sidewalks. So Jeff, where are you at? Do you want to try to plug more to sidewalks, or what do you want to do with the UTV versus sidewalks?
I think that makes sense. It gives you more flexibility in the ambulance fund in case those funds don't come in and we're stuck with some of those, as you call them, municipal accounting considerations. That it gives you more flexibility because that gives you what, $120,000 of flexibility that's not built into there right now, theoretically. Yeah, I don't see that as an issue in my opinion.
And I think you're right about talking with St. Mark's, because one of the, if I remember correctly, one of the top master plan priorities for sidewalks was building down 85 down by St. Mark's.
Well, I don't think we should single out any institution. I think
No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the master plan has already identified that, and that's one of the projects that would be up for the ARPA money too. So,
right, and I think, but we can also, I think this conversation will crystallize it, of course. But if they see that we're not backing down from the sidewalks, that may be a different avenue and purpose for them to pursue versus, I think history tells us they go after the fire capital items more often, at least in the recent years that we saw last year, especially at town meeting.
I thought the UTV would be popular on their list, so we would be running trucks across their fields.
Well, look, if that comes off the list, then that just frees up 40K for the select board, but we have to assume we're getting 0 and then trust that they're gonna reallocate anything they find from that to capital unless they're taking a different approach, which I don't know until we know. All I've asked is that I not stand up there at town meeting and make amendments this year related to contributions or gifts, etc.
Is there any timeline on that pocket park? Do you know? Past what's on in the budget here? I know they have they formed the committee, but did the select board actually put any sort of framework for timing on that?
Mark?
Yeah, I get all the fun questions. So, the committee has been trying to finalize their work. I think they're closer to the end than the beginning. And hopefully they're gonna have some, preferred design for the park, in place, hopefully sometime in the next month.
I have a question just because I don't know. Free cash being which source of funds is free cash?
Free cash is the funds at the end of the year that exceed your expenditures that the Department of Revenue then certifies for expenditure, but you got to appropriate it first. And we normally get about 1.3. This year we ended up with 1.9 because there was some one-time things that got added into it. And at this point, given the select board's desire to make sure we keep the tax rate as low as possible, along with the residential tax shift, which is, adding another, 2.5% on top of everything. We're putting it all into the budget.
Do
So
we
we're
know,
not-
do we
Go
know
ahead.
if that pocket park cost also includes the repair of that intersection right there at all?
So the project for that whole intersection with St. Mark Street 85, that's all, that's included inside of an existing Public Works contract. And the pocket park has been separated out of that contract.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So to summarize, our main changes are around adding 100,000 back in for sidewalks with a source of general fund, replacing the operations supervisor vehicle with the pickup truck not to exceed 50,000, split 30% to the water fund, 70% to ARPA or general fund. Move the fire PPE from general fund to ambulance fund. Move the UTV up from ambulance fund to ARPA. Remove the defibrillator paramedic for fall town meeting consideration. Remove the fire truck Tower 21, 100,000 to fall town meeting consideration, and to also update the operation supervisor vehicle amount for the pickup fund, for the pickup using the water fund estimate of 30%. Does anyone think I did not summarize that appropriately other than at the end?
I don't think did the fire PPE, did you say move that to the ambulance?
I thought I did, but it certainly was my intent if I didn't say it.
Okay.
Is everyone comfortable with that? Okay, then I will move that capital support the recommendation that was just outlined. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay, roll call vote. Hark,
Aye.
Palmer,
Aye.
Shoner,
Aye.
Wheeler,
Aye.
and Malinowski is aye. Thank you. First, Brian, Mark, kudos for going through this. I know it's not been an easy couple of weeks, and thank you to the committee for rehashing a few of this again, but I think we're helping and moving some good things forward. All right, public comment. Seeing none. Any other business anyone wants to conduct?
No, except I would like to apologize for my remarks about where ARPA sidewalk money may go, because that is undetermined and that would be determined by select board and the community.
All right. Okay, then I don't have a meeting schedule yet. Moving forward, let's see where we land headed to town meeting. And if this all crystallizes tomorrow, we can start working on, I'll call it longer term projects and go from there. So I'll be in touch about meeting schedule. So with that, I'll make a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call vote. Hark,
Aye.
Palmer.
Aye.
Shoner.